Michael, the Oscars hold a different significance for everybody. For some folks, it's about the film. Others, it's about the fashion or the glitz or the nostalgia. But in your view, could you also describe the Oscars as a state of the union for the movie business?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. You know, in the book, I tried to take certain Oscar years or even categories that represented turning points for the industry and for American culture, and almost like put certain Oscar years on the couch and psychoanalyze them. And you can tell when there's a real shift in popular tastes or in how the industry sees itself that play out through the Oscars. So even when you don't agree with what they choose for Best Picture or Best Actor or whatever, you can sort of glean some lesson about how the industry is seeing its own image.
All right, so if the Oscars are a State of the Union speech, is the state of the movie business strong?
I don't know. I think it's a really unstable, uncertain time for the movie industry right now. I mean, coming out of the pandemic, the box office has really suffered, and the only thing that people seem to be going in droves to see at the cinema are big franchise movies like Top Gun Maverick and Avatar: The Way of Water and the Marvel movies, and it's everything else we've all gotten so used to watching at home on streaming, and I think the movie industry is really grappling right now with the distribution model because it's changing. They're starting to realize that they can't make the kind of big money that they did when they're putting things on streaming services. And so there's a lot of insecurity right now. Big theater chains are absolutely spiraling. They're going bankrupt. Big theaters are closing. I think it's a very uncertain time.
All right, so let's dig into the Oscars themselves. Who are these Academy members and what gives them the right to tell all the rest of us which movie is the best of the year?
Right. Well, I think if you look at the Oscars as a pure barometer of cinematic worth, you're always going to be frustrated, disappointed, even enraged. The Academy is made up of around 9,000, 10,000 people in the industry. So you have different branches like producers, directors, actors is the biggest branch, documentarians, craftspeople, sound designers, animators, all these different people. So you have to reach a certain level of professional achievement to get into the Academy. So essentially, it's a pretty large group of people who work in this industry in different capacities and have essentially gotten to a certain place in their careers.
In the book, you trace the Hollywood bosses, the studio moguls from Louis B. Mayer through Harvey Weinstein. But before we talk about their moral failings, and we're going to talk about that as well, who holds the power in Hollywood right now? Is it big tech? Because you're seeing Amazon and Apple and Netflix out there.
I know. I mean, one of the fascinating things about Hollywood history, even if you just trace it through the Oscars, as I did in the book, you see how the power dynamics shift. In the old studio system, like people like Louis B. Mayer were like feudal lords. They people who ran Paramount and MGM and Universal, and they were these kings. And then at the end of the studio system in like the 60s or so, you started seeing more power shift to auteur directors. And then it completely changed again. In the 80s, you had the rise of the super agent, like the Michael Ovitzes, people like that, Barry Diller, the sort of upcoming, like the sharks of the movie industry. And right now, I think that it's also shifting. And, you have these new players come in like Netflix and Apple and Amazon kind of horning in to the traditional kind of studio model.
So I mentioned it before, Harvey Weinstein, he did actually change the way that the Oscars were voted upon. So he would campaign very heavily, spending a lot of money. Are the Oscars, sorry for using the word, rigged?
Well, I mean, yes, this is what Harvey Weinstein used to be notorious for, is running very aggressive Oscar campaigning. And throughout the 90s, he did that. And then eventually, it became an arms race where every other studio had to kind of catch up with what he was doing, spend more money, place more ads, hire more consultants. And then this cottage industry grew, and now it became almost like presidential politics, where there's big campaigns. The thing is, though, if you look through history, through the decades, there's never an even playing field. There's always, whether it's the old studio system and you have block voting for MGM or whatever, it was much clubbier in the early days. it's an influence campaign, and you have nominees going on charm offensives, going on these circuits of like cocktail parties and screenings all year. Often people vote for people who are just well liked for some reason.
Now let's talk about those moral failings of Harvey Weinstein and some of the other moguls. Where is Hollywood right now with regard to the Me Too problem?
Still very much grappling with it. There was the era of very high profile people, falling, whether it was Weinstein or, Kevin Spacey, tons of people were just sort of being blipped out of public life. And I think that people in Hollywood are much more conscious now of bad behavior, of sexual harassment, of sexual coercion. That doesn't mean that it's all gone, but I think Hollywood is still trying to figure out what gender equity means on a larger level, including women being able to direct movies. This year we have no female directors nominated for Best Director, after 2 years of women winning Best Director. So there still isn't equity in terms of women having the same opportunities as men in the industry.
What about the whole Oscars so white controversy? Where is the progress with regard to that?
Yeah, that's a really thorny question. And so in 2016, this hashtag went viral, Oscars So White. The Academy responded by being very proactive. I think what they did was really commendable, which is that they opened up the membership to way more people, whether it was people of color, younger people, more women, more international members. I think you start to see that reflected in wins like Parasite and in movies this year like All Quiet on the Western Front. It's much broader and more global. But the larger question of people of color having access and having opportunities in equal measure is something that I think the industry is really doing in fits and starts. And for instance, this year, as much progress as the Academy has made in who is doing the voting, they can't control what people vote for. And so this year, you have no black actresses in the Best Actress category. No woman of color has won in that category since Halle Berry in 2002. And there has never been a black director to win Best Director. So, it always feels like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back.
What about the show itself? Because it's something that people like to complain about it. They almost tune in so they can complain about it the next day. What's the best type of show, according to your analysis? What type of host? What type of format?
Well, I think arguing about the Oscars is part of the fun, and people have always complained that it's too long, it's too boring. I mean, you go back in history, I wrote a whole chapter in the book about the disastrous ceremony of 1989, which notoriously began with an 11-minute opening number, including Rob Lowe singing Proud Mary with a woman dressed as Snow White at a replica of the Coconut Grove with dancing cocktail tables. Just completely insane. So people have always called the show bloated, overdone, this and that. I mean, my favorite era was the Billy Crystal era of the early 90s when he did those great medleys, and he sort of brought a sort of humor and ironic distance to it. I don't know. I mean, I feel like the Oscars are best when they kind of take themselves seriously but allow spontaneous things to happen. And the first time I went to cover them in person was 2017, the year of the big envelope mix-up with Moonlight and La La Land. And it was just mind-bending. I'm a lover of drama and chaos at the Oscars, so I kind of embrace that kind of thing. But I generally don't think the Academy should try to make the Oscars cool. It feels a little bit like your math teacher trying to rap about long division.
And then finally, your thoughts on the slap scene around the world.
Yeah, I was there in the balcony. I saw it. I am very nearsighted, so I kind of saw it. I more heard it. I heard Will Smith screaming and thought, you can't say that word on network TV. This is a real moment. I mean, it was just completely mind-blowing that happened. And what I love about the Oscars, they always leave room for spontaneity. You never know who's going to win, so there's authentic emotion. But then there's this echelon of things that happen that are so wild and crazy, like the streaker of 1974, or the envelope mix-up, or the slap, that just, I mean, to me, it's very exciting live TV, but you just know it's going to be, a year and more of discourse, of deconstructing what this moment meant. I mean, it was just absolutely wild to be there.
Well, it's a great book. Congratulations. Thanks for coming on and talking about it.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.